Erev Tov, everyone. One of the most famous statements of Rashi appears in this week's Parsha. Rashi is quoting a Torah's Kohanim. So the Parsha begins by Davar Hashem al Moshe Bahar Sinai Lemor. So the Torah emphasizes that this Parsha is from Bahar Sinai, when Moshe was up on the mountain, so to speak. And then the Torah begins with the description of Shemitah. Shonim Tizah. The seventh year is Shabbos Haaretz. So the Torah's Kohanim asks the question, Ma inyan Shemitah etzel Har Sinai. What's the connection here? So the question really is, by the way, this became a folk saying amongst the Jewish people, that if you want to say things don't fit together, they're not logical. So then the phrase always was, Ma inyan Shemitah etzel Har Sinai. What's the connection here? So the question is a valid question. What is the connection? Because if we're talking Har Sinai, there are 612 other mitzvahs that could also be said that Moshe heard on Har Sinai. And in fact, by the Luchos Avonim, by the Aseres Advorim, which certainly emanates from Sinai, so that the Torah should have said more explicitly Bar Sinai there too. So Rashi quotes the answer of the Torah's Kohanim, which, if we think about it a little, is really not an answer. It's almost a non sequitur. It's almost begs the question, repeats the question. He says, Ma inyan Shemitah Sinai Nemar. Since we know that Shemitah was told us on Sinai, so Kol HaMitzvahs Kulo Sinai. So from there we can infer that all of the mitzvahs that were given to the Jewish people, that Moshe taught us, they all emanate from Sinai. What kind of an answer is that? That's the question. The question is, why is Shemitah special? So he answers, because Shemitah is from Sinai, so everything is from Sinai. But that answer has nothing to do with the question. And that remains a difficulty that the Meforshim deal with, have dealt with throughout the centuries. And to be perfectly honest with you, it's very difficult to find an explanation that would seem to be satisfactory. There are those that wish to say that the connection is, and this is a reach, but it has in it certain validity. This is, so to speak, a law that guarantees the fertility of the land here in Eretz Yisrael. It's a well-established fact in agriculture that fields that are overworked eventually lose their ability to produce grain, fruit, whatever. And therefore, in modern agriculture, all crops are rotated. You don't work at one year after the other to the same intensity. And in the rotation, there are always fields that are left fallow, that are left unworked. So simply because of the nature of farming and of agriculture, Shemitah would have come by itself. People would leave fields untilled because if you work it 7 years in a row, after a while, the field loses its ability. So you have to leave a period of time when it is not worked in order that in the long run, the field will produce more and continually and better crops. So therefore, this is a type of a mitzvah that, so to speak, we would be able to, society would be able to figure it out itself. It's what we call mishpatim, mitzvot that have a logic to it that human beings can understand, that human beings will understand the benefit thereof. So I would say that I understand that the chukim, the mitzvot for which we do not have logic, the mitzvahs for which we do not have rational explanations, and we do not know the practicality of them. Those mitzvahs were given to us on Sinai. That's why Davar Hashem Moshe B'Har Sinai Lemor, like Zos Chukas HaTorah. This is what the Torah said, do it. But mitzvahs that we could understand ourselves, and that the human society, so to speak, even without the Torah, would come to appreciate and inculcate into the human way of life. So those mitzvahs they're not from the Torah. Those mitzvahs are from human wisdom, practice, experience. They're not necessarily godly commandments. So the Torah wanted to emphasize that even those mitzvahs that we think we understand, that have a basis in logic, even those mitzvahs are Mahar Sinai. And that even the mishpatim have to be viewed as chukim. And therefore, that's why it says, lo signo, lo sigzo, lo sirzo. These are things that society itself would understand. Even though they wouldn't necessarily observe it, but they would understand the necessity for it. So the Torah, in order to emphasize that even those mitzvahs that we think we understand and that we think are beneficial to us and that we would observe them anyway, and Sinai Nemru, they were taught to us from Sinai. And that's the reason why we observe them. So the Gemara already says that if a person says, the Gemara says we could have learned a lot from animals, from cats, from all sorts. We could have learned cleanliness from the cat. We'd learn honesty from the stork, etc. But the Torah doesn't leave it to us to do so because of the fact that that has no lasting effect, so to speak. And it's only because it has the imprimatur of the Torah of Bahar Sinai upon it, that therefore the mitzvah will be observed, it will be preserved, because we're doing the will of the Creator, and it's not just we're doing something because it's a good idea. That's one stream of thought. Second stream of thought has to do with, we would have thought this mitzvah of Shemitah is a mitzvah that's tluya b'oretz. It's dependent on Eretz Yisrael. Usually when the Torah wants to tell us a mitzvah regarding Eretz Yisrael, in the Chumash, it says, "V'yoki savo el oretz." When you come to Eretz Yisrael, so then you should do these mitzvahs. The Torah outlines them for us. And there would arise, therefore, a consideration that mitzvahs are meant to be done in Eretz Yisrael, but if you're in the exile, if you're in foreign society, you're not obliged to do the mitzvahs. And so the Torah wants to tell us that all the mitzvahs are from Har Sinai. And that even though there may be mitzvahs that are kliyat b'oretz, that are dependent upon being in Eretz Yisrael, that nevertheless, where the Torah does not teach us that halacha, it's binding for us in Chutz La'aretz as well. Now there's a different Rashi in Parshas Re'eh, in Chumash Dvarim, where Rashi quotes again a medrash, and that medrash indicates that the Lord taught us, so to speak, to observe mitzvahs and Chutz La'aretz, not because mitzvahs are applicable in Chutz La'aretz, but because we should be in training so that when we come back to Eretz Yisrael, we'll be familiar with how to do mitzvahs. That medrash indicates clearly that all the mitzvahs are in Eretz Yisrael, and that doing the mitzvahs in Chutz La'aretz is only like a training program. It's only that we should get ready, because when we come back to Eretz Yisrael, then there's a chiyuv, then there's an obligation for mitzvahs. But outside of Eretz Yisrael, there isn't. So this Rashi here seems to counteract what Rashi says there. This Rashi seems to indicate that we wanted to teach us that the mitzvahs that we do in Chutz La'aretz are also from Har Sinai. They are, so to speak, of equal import. And that therefore that is the connection why the Torah put it by Shemitah, because Shemitah is a mitzvah that's only in Eretz Yisrael. And we would therefore be of the opinion that the mitzvahs only in Eretz Yisrael are the mitzvahs, and that we're not obligated outside of Eretz Yisrael. So therefore the Torah said that this mitzvah was Bahar Sinai, which is not in Eretz Yisrael, which is in Chutz La'aretz, and that should be the obligation as well. A very difficult Rashi, a very difficult Torah's gone in, because no matter how we fit it, it doesn't quite fit. But the concepts that are raised by it been discussed throughout the centuries by the commentators out of the Forshim. And so these are two streams, two sets of ideas. There are many others as well to try and deal with this apparent non-answer to the question that was asked, Ma inyan Shemitah Eitzel Har Sinai. Rabbi Chananya ben Akash Omer Ratzak HaKadosh Baruch Hu L'Zakos Es Yisrael V'filcha Chibur Lahem Torah Mitzvot Shenemar Adonai Chafetz Aman Tzidko Yagdil Torah V'Yadil.